Thanks for tuning into the Mutual Fund Show. I'm Neeraj Shah. And as we told you in all the teases that we did for the show, the conversation today is pretty riveting. I think the budget, and we did some pieces around this immediately post the budget, because the budget seemed to be an infra budget. The point is, as we pulled out, and the question that we are posing to our guest today, or rather something that he's also commenting on, and he's made a small presentation of sorts on that. We've chosen the best pieces to show you as well. But the question is, are infra-sectoral mutual funds a good place to invest in, or is it another false storm? Of course, we'll also be talking about the China Plus One strategy and how to play that through mutual funds. But I'm pretty kicked about the infra-sectoral funds because, over the last 10, 12, 15 years, there have been a number of false starts, and these can this time be different. Let's get in Mr. Sunil Subramaniam in, and he's no introduction really of Sundaram Mutual, to talk about where is he parked on this argument. Of course, Mr. Subramaniam, at the outset, let me ask you, are you on the throes of launching an infra fund?
No, we already have a well-established infra fund. So this is not an NFO pitch through the back door. It's not that.
Yeah, no, I just thought, let's get, you would ask, fund kar rahe honge, isliye show kar rahe hain. So I thought, let's just, okay. So let's talk about this. What are your thoughts, Mr. Subramaniam? Because I know you've got a lot of thoughts, but my primary question to you is this. We've seen a number of false starts. What is your thought this time around?
See, I'll tell you what, this is basically the story of the boy who cried wolf, right? Every time said the wolf is coming, it didn't come. And then one fine day it arrived. And people tend to say, are nahi hua, and they miss it. So my point here is that I feel that the odds are very much in favor of infra being the biggest wealth creator over the next 5 to 10 year period, right? And I think it's a very sustainable story. But unfortunately, we've seen lots of false dawns, which as I called it, right? So the first was, there was a big capex boom in 2011-12 when India was just coming out of the 2008 crisis. There was a lot of capex done by the government. Everybody bought infra funds, and then the crash happened and they lost money. Then Mr. Modi came to power. Again, Mr. Modi's main thrust was infrastructure, roads, everything. He put in a lot of effort, and you see again the 2014 to 17 period, real infra work was done. Infra mutual funds went up, but then, the economy went into a tailspin, and then the COVID crisis came and gave it a big thupper. So again, proved a false dawn. Now, what happens is that, again, there is a green shoots happening and a lot of stuff happening. But this time, I believe that there is the ability, and it starts with Mr. Modi having absolute majority, both houses of parliament, which was not the case earlier. That's number one. Number two is that the crisis has given us an opportunity, because during the crisis, right, what I liked about the way the government handled it, I know in terms of the budget being an infra capex one, was that the government didn't shy away from expanding fiscal deficit, but using it in the right place for infra. So I think that's where the seriousness of the story, I think, gets a second. And then there is a China Plus One, which we will develop in during the course. So today, my confidence level that infra sector mutual funds are probably the best wealth creation sectors within the mutual fund space over the next 5-10 years. And I'm keen to go and tell investors, don't go by your past returns. Right now, they don't look great, but this is the place to be. And don't go by the past times that the promises were not delivered. This time, I believe there's a reasonable chance, and I'd like to, use this to please allocate some sector of your equity allocations into infrastructure mutual funds. So that's my pitch, and I thought that you should come and say this when people are asking why and not why not. Because in a year, 2 years from now, the returns will be so fantastic, then they'll start jumping in. But they may have missed the early part of the ride. The early bird gets the worm is very true of this kind of a space. So I think that's my thesis. We can dwell in a little more detail as we go through the presentation, so to speak.
Yeah, let's do that. And can I request you to start off with this very interesting set of data points that you've given, which show that the buy and hold strategy in infra mutual funds or the infra space doesn't work, and therefore timing it is very crucial. And is that the reason why you believe that now is the time? Because traditionally, sir, people are bad at timing things. So therefore, it's very important to kind of get that straight.
Yes, I know. And as mutual fund, manufacturers, we keep telling people don't time the market, don't time the market. Timing the market is good, but not in this case. And that's the reason is we did a rolling returns analysis of the NSE Infra Index, right from April 2004 to today, 17 years. And what is rolling return analysis? Every day you make an investment, either for 1 year, 3 year, 5 year, or 10 year, and see what happened to it. So you have a phenomenal, for example, you have almost 6,000 data points for a 1 year return, and you have almost 2,500 data points for a 10 year return. So this gives you the average, the maximum, minimum. There's a solidity to this kind of analysis. And what is telling you is that if you blindly stayed for a 10-year period, the average return you got was either 2% or in 5 years, 3%. Why? Because it's cyclical. Because very often you enter the wrong time of the cycle and exit at the wrong time. So the point we are trying to make here through this is that if you get your timing right, you can make as much as 34% per annum over a 5-year period, which is the time frame I'm talking about now. So, but if you don't get your timing right, you could make huge losses. So the timing is right, and the probability of getting that is also a function of the timing. So if you see here, the probability, and why do you put money in equity? And this is high risk equity, mind you, to beat inflation. So I'll draw your attention to the last line. And as you can see, on an average, you only 20 to 29%, you beat the inflation. That is, you got 7% plus returns. But if you get your time right, that could be 75, 80% in terms of timing. So unlike a normal diversified mutual fund, simply buying and holding in infra doesn't work. Your timing of entry, timing of exit are both crucial. But if you do that, you can get a lot of multi-bagger returns in your portfolio.
What happened in the budget, Mr. Subramanian, is that a harbinger of things to come, so to say, you reckon? Because the same government has been there for a while. Why is it that you believe that this is the time to do so?
So there are 3 reasons for that. So first is that this is the government doing what it wanted to do but couldn't succeed. And why I believe it can succeed? I said majority in both houses of the parliament. The crisis is an opportunity, so they can push through these tough things. But the third and most important thing is the China factor. Because for infrastructure, right? What is infrastructure? People tend to think of airports, ports, roads, railways. They are infrastructure. But an infrastructure mutual fund is not going to go and invest in an airport project. It's not going to make money for you by investing in a road project. It's going to make money by investing in companies benefiting from the infrastructure. So when you then define the infrastructure this way, you can say that anything that creates that demand. So what happens when you build a road, port, airport? You need cement, you need steel, you need building materials. But what happens when you build a house, an individual? You need cement, you need steel, you need building materials. So the infra space is a feeder of multiple thought processes. And the 3 things that are driving this, the confidence, is first is the housing sector. Why? Interest rates are at an all-time low, 6.7%. Property prices have been stable. Incomes of people have risen. So 10 years ago, it cost 50% of a person, the EMI, as a proportion of his salary. Today, that is down to 29%. So it's never been cheaper to buy a house. In fact, it's also a very good time because just with 3% more money from your pocket every month, you can actually rent a house, take advantage of the tax benefit, build it. So we believe that along with the government's Aadhaar housing project and all of those things, that housing will be a big, big driver of the infra space. That's number 1. Number 2 is the national infrastructure pipeline. 111 lakh crores is the outlay over 5 years that the government is going to do this. Now, all that money is not going to come from the government. They're going to tap sovereign wealth funds. They've created a lot of tax incentives for that. They're going to tap a lot of other resources. They're creating a new development bank in the budget. You heard the Development Finance Bank. So we believe that the government's thrust on infrastructure this time carries more teeth. And the budget was a reinforcement of that because they've created. The third thing is that there's China plus one opportunity, where I will come to the China one opportunity probably in later, but the key is financing this has to come from FDI. And that's where a number of reforms that the government has taken in opening up FDI, in defense, in railways, in insurance, in a number of sectors they've opened up. They opened up the public sector to the private sector, where again foreigners can participate. So FDI coming in, and when foreigners come in, the beauty of this whole thing is that normally you say infrastructure has to cater to the domestic market, right? You build something domestic. But no, with the FDI route, what happens is that India can become the manufacturing capital, which place China had. So this FDI which will come in, I believe, will be export-oriented FDI. So it will give a boost to exports, but they're going to come in and setting up factories. And what has this government already done to support that? They've reduced the corporate tax rate from 35% to 17%. Unbelievably, that's 2 years back. And this is now comparable to Singapore. Singapore and India are the cheapest in terms of tax rates in the world. So for a foreigner. Second is all the infrastructure work the government has already done, the licenses they have created, the FDI limits, means that in ease of doing business, India's ranking has improved 79 places over the last 5 years. So foreigner looking at India 5 years ago to now, there's a world of difference. So I believe that the confidence comes to me because you see India's FDI chart has been rising. We are getting $50 to $60 billion a year, but that's coming mostly into the private equity, internet, startups, Swiggy, Zomato. I think we need to just divert that into the manufacturing space, and you have probably potentially $100 billion a year of foreigners financing the capex story. So I think that's the reason I get a confidence. And then for this FDI to come in, who's going to come in? The people who are currently manufacturing in China. Now, why should they come from China? I'm not talking about Trump's tariff wars. I'm not talking about the recent, yes, the COVID crisis originating from China means that a lot of foreigners have got a little wary of China. But that's a small factor, important factor, but small factor. But the core factor is something I called structural advantage for India. What is the structural advantage? The structural advantage is our youth population. As you know, India has an average age of 28 years, but that's not it. The 2017, it's a hallmark year. Though it's about a few years back, I'd like to use it as a starting point. 2017 is the year a very important thing took place. China's labor population, the aging, because they implemented a one family, one child policy, started declining. From 2017 onwards, China's population has begun a declining trend because they've not produced enough new babies. Okay, India has not adopted any such family planning. So the unbelievable thing is in the decade 2017 to 27, India is going to add 117 million people to the workforce. China is losing 23 million people from their workforce. The next biggest country to supply labor into the population is Indonesia at 17 million, one of our size. So, and not only that, the British gave us a good education system, which we have built on in terms of the pharma, the IT, and other skilled. So this slide tells you that whether it is people skills and availability, whether it is financial attractiveness through the tax rates, or it is the business environment through ease of doing business. India has shown such strong improvement that you attribute points. India already looks like being one of the most globally attractive companies for manufacturing to come in. It is this. So what we believe is that more and more foreign multinationals are going to be looking at a China plus one strategy. It's not that they're going to stop manufacturing in China, but China's per capita income, thanks to their success over the last decade, 15 years, per capita income is close to $10,000 per capita. India is $2,000. Why do I point this out? I point this out because our labor is 5 times cheaper than China. So A, the supply of labor, B, the cost of labor, means that foreigners who are in competing markets who need to reduce every cost are going to look at diversifying their production facility away from China, and India has to be in a pole position there. All these steps, and the final step is a 3-letter word. It is called PLI, Production Linked Incentive, targeted directly at the foreign people who are manufacturing in China. What is this? Any factory which is set up in specified industries, already 13, 14 such industries have been identified. Any factory is set up, the value addition they bring, when you pull out iron ore from the ground, that's not going to count. What you make that iron ore into a steel and steel into a car, that value addition, 5%, 5 to 6% of the value addition for 5 years, government is going to put into those companies as an incentive. So phenomenally competitive advantage. So I believe that already in the electronics side, you've already seen all the Samsung and the Apple manufacturing.
And
So
you
I
will
believe
be
that. So that's my reason why I believe that this time it's not a false dawn, because I believe that all these factors are coming together in a way that, and the final argument here, in a way, to put it across, Neeraj, is the fact that the FII money coming into India, if you analyze it and separate out the hedge funds from the pension funds, you'll see that the component of sovereign wealth fund, pension fund, long-term money is
much
being
higher.
significant, much higher. And why? Because they see this potential translating into EPS in the Indian companies, corporate sector, and translating to value.
Got it. Well, and that your confidence is palpable. If your confidence was the reason why one would invest, then I think everybody would park all their monies into these. So thank you so much for that. I have one final question, Mr. Subramaniam, and that is, would you believe, therefore, that sectoral thematic infra funds would give a bigger bang for the buck as opposed to diversified mutual funds? I know both could be good, but I'm asking you that if indeed you're choosing to say that this time is different and the reasons are not just housing and infrastructure, but also PLI, also other factors, then would you believe that diversified mutual funds could give equally good returns, or carefully chosen infrastructure thematic funds could probably give a better alpha between two categories?
I think the second is true. That is, a diversified mutual fund, that fund manager would obviously have an allocation to infra, because this story is they know it, right? But I'm saying, as a smart investor, if you can time your exit right, that is the key here. Because in a diversified mutual fund, the fund manager plans the exit. So that's why they say buy and hold. Because if infra stops being the flavor 5 years, 10 years down the road, and something else is the flavor, the fund manager take that switch yourself. So how do you judge this? It's basically the business cycles. I believe that starting from March, our economy has turned into a new virtuous business cycle, which is ultimately something that infrastructure related sectors are all very cyclical. So I think that if you look at the bounce, I would like to take 2003 to 8, which was one of the strongest bull cycles that we see, which I believe we are now set to see. At that time, you had something like 55% per annum returns from small cap funds, from infra funds at that. So here you can see on the graph, right? India has been through multiple cycles, 2003 to 8, 8 to 13 was a bad cycle, global financial crisis. Again, 13 to 17, the Modi regime, first half was a good cycle. Then 17, we started the downturn with all the crises. And now from March again. So when you look at this virtuous vicious cycle, what happens is that cyclical things like the small cap or the infra do much better than a safety oriented large cap kind of a thing in a virtuous cycle, and the opposite is true in a vicious cycle. So if you sense a vicious cycle on the way, that's the time to pull your money out. Now, as a normal investor, how do you know when to pull out? There are two ways to approach this. One is the economic signals are there in terms of valuations. If valuations reach very, very high, right, that means that the market is over promising the future. Today, if you see the valuation chart, I believe we are still way off the peak valuations of the infra sector in 2008, which was the last very big peak. Number one. Number two is set yourself an ambitious goal, right? Because normally you would expect 10 to 15% return from your normal diversified mutual fund, right? That's what you expect. Nominal GDP plus a little bit of alpha. Set yourself a 25% return per annum, and let's say you apply the rule of 72, which is what it says. At 24%, you will double your money in 3 years, right? 24 threes are, right? Why I'm saying this is that set yourself a target that I want to double my money. Arguably in the 3 to 5 year, you will double it, and then I'm saying ruthlessly exit when you have doubled your money. Don't get greedy and say, oh, it's already doubled, now can it quadruple? Can I hang on a little bit more? No. I said, if you take that kind of an approach, right? Walk out when you double. After that, whatever gain you have lost, but you made double. Set that goal to yourself right at the beginning, because the time is right. I'm sure that goal will be achieved. If not in 3 years, maybe 3.5 years. Worst case, maybe 5. But when you're doubling happens, even if it happens in 5, you still made 15% per annum returns, right? So my suggestion is that choose it that way. It's a wealth creating sector. Set your goals ambitiously, but when those goals are reached, ruthlessly exit. That's the best way for a lay investor also to play a cyclical sectoral MF.
Yeah. And a lay investor, please don't therefore set a goal of 4x, because that will be too tough. You will not reach the goal and then you but Mr. Subramaniam, this was fantastic. Thank you so much for actually joining us and giving us a very nice sense of how people can tactically allocate money in mutual funds as well. It was really nice of you.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. All the very best.
Pleasure was ours. Well, viewers, I hope this in more ways than one makes you aware of the possibilities that exist. Now, keep in mind, we asked Mr. Sunil Subramaniam about whether there's a possible NF or no. Clearly, there isn't. But it's also important to try and get an additional view on this topic and some other topics as well, something that we do every show. And therefore, let's get in Tarun Birani to talk about his thoughts as well on this. Tarun, good evening, and thanks so much for joining in. We were just talking to Mr. Sunil Subramaniam about for the last 15 minutes. And I would want your brief view on infra before we move on to the topics that we discuss every show. But first, a view on infrastructure funds. They've promised a lot in the past and failed to deliver. Do you believe that this time around could be different? Why or why not?
Yeah, good evening, Neeraj, and thank you for having me here. So I have a very different view. I feel investing based on suitability is one of the most important part. It is not something one can jump in if it is like a herd mentality moving in the markets. I have observed that the infrastructure sectors in the past have not been a wealth creating sector, and normally when we look at long-term investors, we don't want anybody to tactically keep on moving in, moving out. So we did a rolling return research of across 10-year plus infra funds available in the market as well as the category. And to my surprise, there has been almost 26% of the times one should be prepared for negative returns with a 5-year horizon in that study. So that tells me that why can't I live without infra fund, and rather my fund manager in either a diversified large cap or a mid cap or a multi cap fund takes a tactical call in an infra fund, and that would be a better way. I continue to believe there is a strong momentum going on for infrastructure. I was hearing Mr. Subramaniam also. There are a lot of positive things which are happening in the infrastructure sector as we speak in our country, and this could definitely lead to a lot of positives. But at the same time, looking at the track record in the past, it doesn't give me a lot of confidence, and I feel the risk reward ratio, looking at the past historical track record, doesn't look that attractive to me. So I would rather play an infrastructure story through a means of a diversified fund rather than a sector specific infrastructure fund.
Okay, so viewers, let me try and distill this, right? Just so that you don't get confused also. Tarun's point of view is that because he wants his set of investors to try and make the best possible returns with the minimal possible risk, he's saying go out for maybe diversified funds or some of the other funds, because their analysis over the last 10 years, and Tarun mentioned the rolling return analysis as well, doesn't quite give the confidence to him to advise his clients to go out and invest into those funds, and there are better options available. If you believe in Mr. Sunil Subramaniam's argument, his argument is that he, in his experience and wisdom, believes that don't look at the past returns, because tactically, as per their calculations, the next few years might be great for infrastructure, and therefore you're going to time it well. So here's the key, viewers. If you believe that you can time these things well, and if you believe in Mr. Sunil Subramaniam's argument and do your own research, then you could go out and do it. Else, you might want to play it safe and play it the way Tarun was talking about. So that's the long and short of this whole conversation. Keep in mind, the budget gave a lot of emphasis on infra, so you have to keep that at the back of your mind. However, something that we're doing every show now, point number one, talk about one key mutual fund and the category surrounding it, of course, and the reasons for that mutual fund, of course, will be given by our guest today. And then talk about one key recommendation from his end, something that he or she is telling his particular set of clients. We'll get a disclaimer from Tarun about what are the set of clients to which that fund would be suitable as well. But point number one first. And Tarun, I think you've chosen the Kotak Emerging Equity Fund, which is apparently one of the best performing mid-cap funds. Can you talk a bit about this fund? And if people have this fund, what should they do? If they don't have, what should they do? And then, of course, if you can also give us a sense of the category.
Sure. So, Neeraj, when I look at selection, you asked me to select a category and to select a fund. So while doing that exercise, I thought of a category called mid cap, where I see in terms of valuation compared to a large cap or a blue chip category continues to look more attractive to me. And I see possibility of getting better returns in this available sector. So in the mid and small cap strategy, one need to be very careful in terms of the risk portion. The risk will be comparatively much higher compared to a blue chip or a large cap category. But while observing this category, what I did as an exercise was I selected all funds with a 10-year plus track record. And in that 10-year track record, the top 5-6 names which came across, I tried doing some analysis on that. And my analysis was mainly focused around two factors. One was a quantitative, another was a qualitative factor. While doing that quantitative analysis, I looked at various factors like trailing returns, I looked at rolling returns, I looked at downside capture ratio. While doing all these exercises, what I feel right now, the momentum is strong, and we feel that next 5 to 10 years, you could see greater returns coming from this category. So I would like to go for a fund which can capture the highest upside in coming years. That is what I am looking at. Again, you can see that this Kotak Emerging Fund has delivered almost 21% times more between returns between 15 to 20%, and it has delivered almost 48% times. I think it is written wrong, not 4.86. This is 48.6% times. It has given more than 20% return. So that again gives you a lot of confidence. The kind of risk you are taking, the rewards are also handsome. What I like again was the team which is managing this fund has a good track record for almost a decade, and they are managing continuously this fund. So they have been doing it with a purpose. They have been doing very smartly. So that is also one positive thing. Again, the diversification, since in mid-cap strategy, you can go wrong also. So you need to be much more diversified compared to, let's say, a blue chip strategy. This fund has maintained that diversification, and they end up taking almost 40 plus stocks in the portfolio. So that is again a positive which I like. The risk management of this fund is very good. As we speak currently, they are also bullish more on the cyclicals and the infra oriented theme, and almost 45% of the portfolio is positioned there. So I would like to play the mid cap strategy with this kind of structure. That is my argument. Yes. Again, the process flow is good, people flow is good, risk management is good, and the performance has been good. And the upside capture ratio is good. And in terms of downside, we looked into last year when the COVID happened, mid-cap category was down almost 40%. This was down 30%. So again, the downside capture is good in this fund. Yeah.
Those numbers look pretty interesting, and therefore, thanks for this argument. Viewers, keep in mind this while Tarun is recommending the Kotak Emerging Fund, this is essentially a call on the category, and therefore a fund within that category, and the fund which is amongst the best. Now comes the key question about what is it that TPNG Capital Advisors is advising their clients to do, and out of the plethora of funds that they may be advocating, what is that one standout fund at the current point of time? Why so? And what kind of people can apply or can invest in that fund? Tarun, I presume you are recommending the Parag Parikh Flexi Cap Fund. Why this one? And what kind of investors can apply to this?
So, Neeraj, we were trying to understand in the environment where we are in currently, what kind of strategies can win. And in that, we reviewed a lot of strategies which are India's only centric set strategy versus strategies which have the flexibility to go outside India also. So under that strategy, we came across this fund called Parag Parikh Long-Term Equity Fund, and which is renamed as FlexiCap Fund. The good part about this strategy is they have almost 30% of their allocation outside India, which I think in last 3-4 years has captured the imaginations of Indian, and that there need to be allocation outside India. There are so many good companies outside India where as an investor, why I should look at only India, right? So keeping that in mind, we felt a global kind of allocation really adds and bring more and when you look at this fund's downside protection, we did this analysis for last 5 years. The downside protection is just 40% compared to the average downside, which is at 70-75% for most of the other funds.
What does that mean?
Like,
what does that mean?
This means when the market goes down by 10%, it goes down only by 4%. So that gives you a lot of protection in the downside. At the same time, it has a upside capture ratio of almost 75% kind of ratio, which again gives you a power that if market goes up by 10, it will go up by 7.5% plus. Again, this fund under its mandate, it can go all out in India also. While talking to that fund house, we realized that they only have one scheme in the overall platter. They don't have 30 schemes, 40 schemes. So that again gives you a lot of confidence that focus is much more in this kind of category. Again, they have been very contrarian investors. I have seen them taking in 2018 some amount of defensive calls also, because they were not comfortable with the valuation at that point of time. So they are ready to take contrarian calls also. They picked up a stock called ITC when nobody was looking at it at 150, 160 rupees. But at that point of time, the dividend yield was attractive. Their hospitality business was, again, most of the pain in that sector was over for them. That's why they looked at that as a value stock. And today, as we speak, that stock is up 50% from that level. Yes, entire market is up, but I like the way they look at capturing the low PE stocks or value stocks in their portfolio. So that is another good thing. They compared to Maruti in India. In terms of valuation, they like Suzuki. So all these gives me a lot of confidence. The why as an investor, I need to be restricted only to India. I need to actually look at an investment opportunity across the globe, right? Why should I restrict myself?
And this could give you a combination of both. And I think that's a pertinent point. Well, Tarun, we'd love to talk more, but out of time completely on this show. But we've captured most of the things that you wanted to say. Any risk factors very quickly, Tarun, for either in a minute, in the Kotak fund that you spoke about or Parag Parikh, any quick risks that you want to point out?
So as an equity investment, if you don't have, from a suitability point of view, if you don't have a 5-year plus horizon, please don't look at equity investment. And you need to be aware that last year equity as a strategy for some point of time has delivered 30 to 40% negative returns. If you don't have the guts to bear that kind of loss, don't get into equity. Don't get into paper loss and paper profit kind of concept. Plant it like a tree, keep watering it, then only you can generate long-term wealth creation. Thank you.
Okay, well, that's true for equities in general, I would reckon, and Tarun recommending that for the two categories that he spoke about as well. Tarun, take a moment to thank you for joining in today and giving us your thoughts. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you, Neeraj. Thank you so much.
And viewers, thanks for tuning in to this leg of the Mutual Fund Show.